You must tell me all your secrets. Remember, we must share everything together. Everything.
You have killed. And you will kill again.
You're getting closer and closer to the most unnatural kind of death. Beyond shock.
What was that?
Beyond horror into total terror. Murder runs wild. Blood runs cold. Deep red.
The conjecture is that an act of bloodshed was once committed in that house.
What is it?
Didn't you hear that?
No, what was it?
I don't know.
Everywhere you look. Everywhere you turn. Death is running with you. Deep red. It'll put you into deep shock.
This is Annie Rose Malamet, and you're listening to Girls, Guts, and Giallo. I'm here today with Drusilla Adeline. Hi, Drusilla.
Hello, thank you for having me.
And we're going to talk today about the Dario Argento classic, Deep Red. And before we start, Drusilla, could you say a little bit about who you are and what you do? You're kind of a Giallo expert.
I wouldn't say expert. I would love to, but I'm a fiend and I'm a fan. But I am a graphic designer and illustrator. I work under the label Sister High Design, and I've done work with Mondo and the Criterion Collection, Keanu Lorber, and theatrical one sheets and home video art and records and fun stuff like that. And then I also produce and edit the horror podcasts Dead for Filth with Michael Verratti and It Listens for the Radio. And so I am a really, really, really big horror fan, and I'm especially a sleazoid monster for everything either vampiric or giallo. And so I'm very, very happy to help bring in what's probably the Citizen Kane of the gialli.
It really is. Yeah, I'm honestly surprised that no one has wanted to talk about it yet. I'm excited to talk about it, although unfortunately there is an extended cut of this film. About 20 minutes of it was cut from the original US version, and it's kind of hard to find the full like 2 hour and 7 minute version, and I wasn't able to watch it, but luckily Drusilla is very familiar with it. So we'll talk about some of the differences as they come up. When do you remember when you first saw this movie and like the impact that it had on you? Why was this a choice for you to talk about?
I first really kind of fell, both for Argento and for the Giallo subgenre kind of at the same time. When I went to not a full like 24-hour horror-a-thon back in Chicago when I was in college, and they showed Tenebrae at like 3 or 4 a.m. and I had no clue what it was. I'd never heard of it. I knew of Suspiria, but I'd never really heard much about Argento, or I didn't even know what Giallo was or meant. And it blew me away, and I left that theater trying to find everything that I possibly could. And Deep Red kept coming up as like this staple of like, for slashers, they have Halloween. For demonic films, they have The Exorcist. For, monster movies, there's Godzilla. But for the Jolly, there's Deep Red and kind of nothing else. That is the peak of the mountain. So it was always one that was on the top of my list, but it was always a hard one to track down in a way that felt complete, because as you mentioned, there are a couple different cuts of the film. There's a US cut, there's an international cut, and there's an extended cut, and it can be very confusing. There's a lot of different home video releases of it, so it took me a while to finally get the complete version of the film. And I saw it probably 4 or 5 years ago, and I had already, I'd already dived into Bava pretty deeply, and I went into Argento's back catalog, and I explored some Martino and some Lenzi, and I was already very steeped in the genre when I was like, all right, I'm wasting my time. Why have I not seen this yet? And so I finally popped the disc in, and it's truly everything people make it out to be. It is absolutely the through line between the sleaziest, goriest, most sensational elements of the Giallo film that you'd expect from Dario or Lucio Fulci or Sergio Martino, but kind of done in a blending with the high art cinema that was being done in Italy at the time of like Michelangelo Antonioni and Federico Fellini, and it's like somehow smack dab in the middle of all of that it comes off feeling a lot more like an art film to me than any other Giallo I've ever seen. And the reason I really wanted to talk about it with you today is because like a lot of Argento's original Giallo films, especially his Animal trilogy and this, it's overtly queer and has openly queer characters running throughout it. But this one does something very, very, very interesting with that queerness that I really want to talk about that not a lot of people discuss.
Hey, I'm really excited. Yeah, I was like, what is she gonna say here when all the queer stuff was coming up? So let's get into it. So 1975, this film comes out. It's directed by Dario Argento. The first time I saw it, I was in high school. I bought it on VHS when I was getting into various subgenres of horror, and I think to this day I've probably only seen the US release. So Drusilla, who is Dario Argento?
He is the son of an Italian film producer steeped in the Italian film industry during and post World War II. And Dario got his start as a film critic and screenwriter. Eventually, he wrote for Sergio Leone's Once Upon a Time in the West. I think it was his first major on-screen credit.
So he was doing like spaghetti westerns.
Mm-hmm. And again, like if there's anyone to start out with and learn besides Leone, is one of the top, is one of the biggest forces in Italian cinema at the time to buddy up with. And I think Visconti or someone, or no, Bertolucci also worked on that script with him. And it's just like
Wow, powerhouses.
truly a hotbed of activity right there. In the late 60s into the early 70s, when he was starting to get into the film industry with his brother and working under his father, there was an Italian subgenre happening that was kind of blowing up across the country of the giallo film, which, you know, derives its name from the cheap yellow paperbacks that were sold of, you know, Agatha Christie stories or cheap crime thrillers or what have you, that blew up, you know, during and post World War II. And the movies that really kind of launched the subgenre were started by Mario Bava
Like Blood and
in
Black
the
Lace.
early late 60s. Yeah, Blood and Black Lace, The Girl Who Knew Too Much, or Evil Eye. They're really Hitchcockian in nature, occasionally kind of funny, a little bit slower, a little bit more melodramatic, a little bit more focused in the American noir and melodrama. Typically, you know, lots of vivid color, great cinematography, plots that have no through line or connection. Things will happen, people will sleep with other people, someone will get murdered, there will be blackmail, there will be scantily clad women, there will be a man with black leather gloves and a straight razor lurking around in the dark. And these movies were made by the truckload in the late 60s, and, you know, started a lot of expatriates and Italian up and coming actors. And, you know, they're like candy. You can just watch 7 in a row, and the plots are fun and wild and weird, and the scores by Ennio Morricone or whoever was able to pick up a pen that day kick ass, and they're just absolute fun, and as much as you can do with a camera. And so Argento comes onto the scene when this cycle is starting to wane a little bit. It'd already been going for a while. Spaghetti westerns were kind of still a thing. The James Bond spoof and ripoff thing was getting a little bit bigger at the time with films like Danger Diabolique, and even Umberto Lenzi was dipping into that in between his giallo efforts. And so Argento decides he wants to become a director, not just a screenwriter. So he writes a script for himself to direct that he knows will be easy to produce. He and his brother were able to make money off of it immediately if they dip into the giallo genre. And so he writes and directs The Bird with the Crystal Plumage in 1971. And it's like a distillation of every other giallo film that had come before it. It's clean, it's mean, it gets straight to the punch. There is a killer. There is a man who sees something happening, and he follows down this mystery, and it is convoluted, and it is crazy, and the title is long, and the music's by Ennio Morricone, and there's a straight razor, and there's a killer, and there's everything that you want, and it's a massive success. And it completely jumpstarts the subgenre. And so in 1972 and 73, there's more giallo films produced than in any other year before.
Wow.
It's an absolute boom. In 72 alone, Argento directs 2 more movies, The Cat o' Nine Tails and Four Flies in Grey Velvet, completing his Animal trilogy. And all of a sudden, directors like Sergio Martino, Lucio Fulci have all stepped up. People that were just starting out are now diving for cameras, looking to pick up straight razors and black leather gloves and make the next Crystal Plumage knockoff. So you've got a lot more long titles coming, a lot more animal in the name, maybe some kind of color in the name, kind of what we think of now as the cliche tropes of the genre are coming out. More of that Hollywood melodrama feel is kicked to the back. This is a lot more proto-slasher. This is a lot more mean and rough. Some critics kind of describe the difference between Argento's early stuff and the more Lenzi, Bava 60s stuff as M giallo and F giallo, kind of dividing along gender lines, saying that the more female giallo films like Forbidden Photos of a Lady Above Suspicion or $5 for an August Moon are a bit more, you know, less about murder and more about suspense and mystery and sex. And it's typically a fashionable woman who's being pursued by a blackmailer or a potential killer, watching things go down around her and spiraling into an odyssey of sex and drugs. And it's a lot more heady than it is visceral, whereas Argento focused a lot more on the stalk and the slash, a lot more on the blood, a lot more on the razors, and a lot more on the really, really virtuoso cinematography. So after doing his first 3 movies and after kind of kickstarting the genre in a way that he didn't even know was going to happen, and all of a sudden every single movie coming out every single week in cinemas was a giallo film of some varying degree of quality or another, Argento decided that he was done with, cheap horror movies and slashers. He started the craze. Craze was happening. He was over and he was above it. And so he decided to make a historical period film, which didn't go well.
Which one is that?
It wasn't well. The 5 Days. It's a historical film about the Italian Revolution.
Oy.
Yep. So that's what he was up to in 1973.
God, so much happened in like 3 years.
Yeah, and 1973 was like every other director in Italy was making, giallo films. So 1970, Crystal Plumage, 71, Cat o' Nine Tails, and Four Flies. And then Argento goes out into the wild, makes this very serious, very, impassioned historical period kind of political film. No one cares.
Yeah.
Some people care, but especially like it cannot get past it. It's such an Italian film, through and through, that it doesn't export at all. And so he comes back to the drawing board and says, all right, if I've got to go back to the slashers, if I've got to go back to giallo, if I've got to get back into this, I'm doing it how I want to do it. I don't care what the hell all these other people are doing, and I'm doing it right. And that's when he writes Profondo Rosso, Deep Red, which comes out in 1975, and it takes some liberties that really haven't been seen in the giallo genre before, but bringing in some supernatural elements just so slightly, and he kind of reworks the tropes that he set up in The Bird of the Crystal Plumage of an expatriate going through Italy who's some kind of an artist, who has some kind of artistic thing, who witnesses a murder, sees or is privy to some kind of clue that they're not aware is a clue when they see this go down, and through police incompetence and their own interest in this nagging feeling that they have the key to solving the crime, are thrust into a position of being an amateur sleuth and tracking down this killer as more bodies begin to fall around them, to, an outrageously stylized mise-en-scène, gorgeous camera work, a very hypnotic and humming soundtrack, and then typically there is a very, very, very twisty ending that reveals something that even the most seasoned giallo fiends in the audience aren't going to expect. And he kind of looks at Deep Red as a remake of Crystal Plumage and kind of like a restart to his career. And it fucking does it. I mean, to some extent, Deep Red reignites the country's interest in giallo films again, but also for some directors, it put the nail on the coffin. They kind of moved the Polichezzi movement after that, the cop crime films that are a lot more fascist and a lot more big dick swing, and I'm gonna kill all the drug dealers in Milan, and a lot less appealing, depending on who you ask. And it's not for a couple years after Deep Red that he doesn't revisit the genre again until Tenebrae in 1982. To kind of really put the final nail in it then, and a film that kind of upends and subverts the Giallo in a way that it almost feels like he's making fun of you. So it's a very important movie in that it's come to kind of define what we think of when we think of the Giallo film, and even most prominent Giallo directors kind of look at it and think like, all right, well, he started it and he ended it. That's the movement, right? And
Yes.
a lot of people think that anything that came after Deep Red isn't Giallo anymore. That like after that point, it falls into these other subgenres, and what started with The Girl Who Knew Too Much ended here. So it's an important film, and it's a
Yes.
gorgeous film, and it's a fun film, and it's got one of the best, most like addictive soundtracks you're ever gonna hear.
Thank you so much for that in-depth history. And yeah, it's an extremely important film. I'm really happy to have you here talking about it because you know so much more about this than I do, and it's really exciting to learn from you. So, this film stars David Hemmings as Marcus Daly, Daria Nicolodi as Gianna Brizzi, and then we also have Masha Merrill as Helga Ullman, Clara Calamai as Martha, Carlo's mother, and Gabriele Lavia as Carlo. Deep Red I read that it was shot mainly in Turin, Italy in 16 weeks, and that Argento chose Turin because at the time there were the most practicing Satanists, more than there were in any other European city, which is really cool.
I love him.
I know. And excluding Leon, which I guess maybe had maybe the most. And the original working title for the film was The Saber-Toothed Tiger, which makes sense. He loves animal titles.
Mm-hmm.
Co-writer Bernardino Zapponi said that the inspiration for the murder scenes came from him and Dario Argento thinking of painful injuries, which the audience could relate to, but the pain of being stabbed or shot is outside the experience of most viewers. So there's these gorgeous close-up shots of the killer's hands, and this is kind of one of the staples of the giallo genre is the gloved killer. And there's these close-up shots of the killer's hands in black leather gloves, and those were actually performed by Dario Argento himself. Because Argento go ahead.
Yeah, he always performs. If he can, he always performs the hands of the killer, which is a choice.
Yeah, that's intense. He was convinced that all of the killing scenes performed by himself would be quicker and easier than teaching the moves to an actor who would require endless retakes. The film's special effects, which include several mechanically operated heads and body parts, which are amazing, were made by Carlo Rambaldi. So, like you said, this is considered his masterpiece. There's 20 minutes gone from the US version. Like you were saying before we started recording, whatever the US did not want to see in 1975 is in the final cut. And in my understanding, you were telling me that there's more gender politics in the final cut, that the main character, Marcus, looks like more of an idiot than he does in the US release.
It's just my opinion, but yeah, a little bit, yeah.
I mean, he already looks like an idiot, so I can imagine.
Well, I really appreciate the way that Argento uses his detectives and investigators in his movies. I mean, first and foremost, they're never a cop. The police are always there in his movies, but they're never the main characters. They're occasionally the villains, or if not, red herrings, or just bumbling idiots getting in the way.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, Dario said ACAB in the 70s, and he's right.
Yeah.
But all of his investigators are deeply flawed men. Every single one of them. If you look at Birth of Crystal Plumage, you've got his writer who is poor and bored and out of work in Italy. And then you've got a blind Carl Malden in The Cat o' Nine Tails as a crossword designer paired with a very sexist investigative reporter. And then in Four Flies on Grey Velvet, you've got what's probably Argento's stupidest protagonist in an American drummer who just keeps seeing all this murder going down around him and just, for the life of him, cannot crack it and is just paranoid of everyone. And David Hemmings, fresh off of Antonioni's Blow Up, which, again, like, talk about Italian art cinema from the, middle of the century. It's just like Blow Up is one of the pivotal films in cinema history, period. And is considered by some to fall within the giallo trappings in its own right. And Hemmings' character, has little personality in Deep Red outside of being a little bit macho when he needs to be, which Daria Nicolodi shuts down at every opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
She calls him out on every little piece of BS, and he readily takes it and admits it. But apart from just being, an ennui-suffering pianist in Italy, there's very little we know about him. I mean, his friend Carlo is an alcoholic and seems to be in a fit of depression. Carlo's also gay, kind of openly, kind of not. He's clearly hiding it from Hemmings' character, and seems ashamed of that a little bit. But we know more about Carlo than we do about Hemmings' character. We know more about Helga Ullman than we know about Hemmings' character, and she's not in the movie very long.
I know.
We know more about
I love her, but she's not there very long.
So it's very interesting, these kind of ciphers that he sets up for the main characters, because again, like 1975, especially Italian cinema and American cinema, what we expect from these kinds of movies is a strong, centered white male lead who's going to solve this mystery that these deviants are up to, put the murderer in jail, lock up the key. And again, if you take a look at the giallo genre's roots based in like American film noir and like Alfred Hitchcock films, this role is always a hero's role. This is Cary Grant. This is Jimmy Stewart in like Rear Window. This is Humphrey Bogart, and maybe it's a character who's a little flawed. Maybe he's an alcoholic. Maybe he's not the best man in the world, but goddamn it, he's gonna redeem himself, or he's gonna catch this killer, or it's very I think about like The Big Heat a lot, or Experiment in Terror, the Blake Edwards film. These feel like American attempts, kind of similar and in the same vein. And it's like, these are always very staunch, very heroic, very conservative white men who, if they're not a cop, they're something close, and they're gonna find this thread, and they're gonna expose it for what it is, and they're gonna catch these killers. But in giallo films, it's never that. The main character in a giallo film is either a mentally ill woman,
yes,
a very, very neurotic woman who is beleaguered to the point of near suicide and hysteria,
yes,
who, despite all of that, overcomes, solves the crime, solves what's being done to her, and gets away with it. Or sometimes she ends up getting killed in the end. Either way, it's either that, or the lead of the more masculine-focused giallo films is never really that big macho American lead. It's usually a man putting on this sense of masculinity, this sense of like big, empowered, big dick swinging, this is my world and I'm gonna write it. But they're never that kind of person. They're always an artist of some kind. They're always not in their own country. They're always a foreigner. They're always strange in a way that puts people off and hinders their investigation. And they're not good investigators either. They're frequently wrong.
yes,
A couple people die in this movie because they're wrong.
yes.
So it's very interesting the way he presents this as the main character, as the audience cipher, and as, this depiction of masculinity, because it's fucking flawed, and it's very, very fun to watch from that perspective. As much as Argento is, leading us through this character's perspective through these crimes, he's not agreeing with this person. He's kind of making fun of this lead frequently. And again, like, Argento being the kind of guy who picks Turin because they have the most practicing Satanists and likes to be the hands behind the camera, holding the razor or holding someone's neck. He's enjoying these killers. He's identifying more with them. I mean, the fact that we know more about all the other characters in the movie than the cipher. He's thought more about the mind of the killer. He's thought more about the red herring characters
Yes.
than he has about, this milquetoast cipher in the middle of it all. It's kind of like a game for him of like, what kind of hell can I run this dude through? What's the worst kind of guy to be put in this scenario? What level of confidence and hubris can I shake down to next to nothing? Because again, the way that Deep Red resolves, not to get into the ending just yet, but the way that it resolves, Hemming's still around, but it cuts to the credits so fast. There's no resolution, and we know so little about his character's wants and needs, anything, that the last time we see him is a reflection of his face staring into a pool of blood as the credits roll, and his entire face is just ashen and shocked.
Yes.
There's no pleasure there. There's no triumphant resolution. There is just grief and confusion.
Yeah. That's so much confusion in this movie, especially through him. You were talking about the score also, and the score is extremely iconic. Argento originally contacted a jazz pianist, Giorgio Gaslini, to score the film. He didn't like it. And then he was going to get Pink Floyd to replace Gaslini. But then he turned back to Italy and he found Goblin, a local progressive rock band. And God bless them. And their leader, Claudio Simonetti, impressed Argento by producing 2 compositions within just one night. So that's where we get the amazing Profondo Rosso score. So let's get into the plot of the movie. We open with this kind of like saccharine children singing. There's a shadowy figure wielding a knife. There's a Christmas tree. This is kind of a Christmas movie.
If you're not watching this and Christmas Evil every December 24th and 25th, I mean...
Christmas Evil, Deep Red. There's the score by the Goblins playing. And so we open with a murder, really. And then we get to the European Congress on Parapsychology, which is having a conference on telepathy. They're talking about insects and the way that insects are kind of all psychic because they have a hive mind. And this will show up later in the Dario Argento film Phenomena also, so he's very interested in that concept. The speaker, Professor Giordani, introduces Helga Ullmann from Lithuania, who's a psychic, and she's pretty hot. I'm into her.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And she says her faculties, her abilities have nothing to do whatsoever with magic. And she can see things the very moment they occur, but nothing of what is to come. And she can feel thoughts the very instant they're formed. So this is a scientific explanation for being a psychic instead of a mystical explanation, even though, like, as you were saying, there are some supernatural elements in this movie, or maybe like there's hints at the supernatural and then they're explained through the real. There's already so much red, like right at the beginning. Um,
Oh, we start with a big red curtain and
yeah,
it's magically pulled back as the camera flies in. It
yes.
it opens as operatic as a movie can, immediately announcing to you what you're in for.
Right, which he does a lot and then he kind of plays with intentionally in opera, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
Helga demonstrates her ability, her psychic ability to the audience, but then she begins to freak out because she can see something horrible happening in her mind. Like she can feel, she says, I can feel death in this room. I feel a presence, a twisted mind sending thoughts. So the killer, possibly from the beginning of the film, we might assume, is having these horrible murderous thoughts in this room. And she points to someone in the audience and she says, You have killed and you will kill again. There's a child singing in that house. The
Hmm.
the children's singing is going to come up over and over again. And now we start to get these POV shots, which are so iconic to the Giallo genre. Um, we get into the which kind of started with Psycho, Hitchcock, and like you were saying, Hitchcock was a huge influence on Giallo. And there's a scene where there's a person in the bathroom, maybe puking, using the sink. And then this person encounters a man in the bathroom who asks if they need help. So we're in the killer's mindset. Then we
Hmm.
see them, they zip up these gorgeous black leather gloves and they walk into the empty conference hall. They watch Helga leave. She's telling she's telling the professor about her experience of hearing those thoughts. And again, she feels the presence of the person and she twitches. She doesn't know someone's watching her. And now we get one of my favorite sequences, which I was wondering if you could describe, where we see like these various childish items.
Oh, I love these little tableaus so
Yes.
much. They do, they appear frequently throughout the film, always as a portent of doom, right before someone's about to be killed, kind of like a glimpse into the killer's mind a little bit before they prepare to do the deed. And there are these macro lensed close ups of a black table, and you just kind of like a black box theater, kind of empty ether. You can't see anything else other than these incredibly tight, incredibly close and crisp. And I have no clue what kind of lens they're using to achieve this. It is insanely close.
Right.
View on these, a little plastic doll, some jacks, some, trinkets and toys as the goblin score kicks the hell in, and it's sliding over all of this. And then we get the knife, and we get the blade, and then we get the black leather gloves, and you get the super close up on them being zipped up with a hand. You get to see the zipper moving in incredible detail. And then there's a little tape recorder there, which has that little children's song from the Christmas thing on it. And they keep this fucking tape recorder on them and they play it right before every kill. The killer has their own theme song that they play to announce themselves. The absolute style.
So much. And like the shot of the
I mean,
eye with the heavy black eyeliner.
incredibly important, that.
Yes.
Incredibly, incredibly important. Again, so what this is doing is we're getting this kick-ass goblin score and then going straight into the tape recorder playing the very haunting, lilting children's choir theme, mixed with black leather gloves, straight razor blade, mixed with all of these little children's toys in this very surreal, incredible close-up, putting it all together. And then the only cut in that sequence is a cut to the incredible close-up on the killer's eye, applying makeup to that. So you're mixing three things. You're mixing the murderous intent of the black leather gloves and the blade with the children's items and song, which 1 + 1 = insanity. that is done to a point. That is not just we're gonna creep you out. That is you're supposed to read that as a state of arrested development combined with homicidal tendencies. This is not a mentally sound person, right? Then blended with the shot of the eyeliner. So this is the killer trying to, the eyeliner is applied in the same way that the black leather gloves are applied. They are applied for the purpose of killing. So part of it is the stylistic choice of carrying around a fucking tape recorder with your theme song. That's a little bit of it, but it's also, to use a pun and to reference another film, getting dressed to kill.
Yes.
So this person who we are reading as violent, unstable, is applying makeup with the intention of killing someone. I'm going to go ahead and do the synergy and add all of that together and also take back to Psycho again and the Alfred Hitchcock rooting. It's done incredibly on purpose.
Yes.
This is all done on purpose. Everything Argento does in this movie is like Kubrick levels of detail. So Psycho came out in 1960, and plot twist, Norman Bates is the killer. He dresses up as his mom, holds a knife, and he kills people.
What?
If you haven't seen it, what the fuck? Anyway, that's an important movie, and that's an important twist. The concept of a killer in a dress, a man in the dress killer, has been done frequently before and after. Psycho was the movie that epitomized it. It's not the first movie to do it. The first movie to do it was also directed by Alfred Hitchcock 30 years previously. It's called Murder. It's not as good, but it's also very good. Hitchcock likes a queer-coded killer. Hitchcock likes queer characters. You could really only get them in the studio system and under the Hays Code in a way that they're punished. So therefore, they kind of end up being Mrs. Danvers. They kind of end up being, Mr. Crisscross and Strangers on a Train. They end up being the boys in Rope. They end up being the killers. They ended up being the villains. And Hitchcock knows what shocks Middle America, and he knows what's so shocking about the Ed Gein case. And so when he puts Psycho together, he puts Tony Perkins, who is also a homosexual himself, which is well known within Hollywood, but not well known within Middle America, and a dress and a wig with a big swinging light effect, brandishing a blade, and this is the big shocker of the movie. Yeah. This was then aped to death over the next 10 to 20 years. You can see this in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You can see this in William Castle's Homicidal? Yeah, I think it's
homicidal.
But it's homicidal. I'm thinking of Homicide from Young Gonzalez's Knife Plus Heart. Anyway, I keep doing that. I did that in a different podcast recently. This happens frequently to the point that audiences in the late 60s and into the 70s were expecting this. This was done so often, and in other Giallo films. This was like, if you look at Lamberto Bava's A Blade in the Dark, guess what? It's a dude in a dress. He's mentally unfit to be a person. He's got to kill people. Also, done later in Dress to Kill and Silence of the Lambs. And apparently in the new book by scumbag human being
by J.K. Turfling
and wizard moneymonger J.K. Rowling and the second X-Files movie written and directed by Chris Carter. It's also the twist ending to that one too. So if you haven't gleaned already, I don't like this trope.
No.
This is a problematic trope. This, for the longest time, was the only depiction of trans people in films. You had two options. You could be a funny little drag queen, like Jack Lemmon and Some Like It Hot, or you could be Anthony Perkins with a knife and a rictus grin and Psycho. That's all there was until when did Sense8 come out?
Until like what, 2016, 2015?
Yeah. No, granted, trans people are in movies. Trans characters, trans storylines are in movies. I can look back to the 1960s and 1970s for movies like I Want What I Want.
Let Me Die
But those
a
are
Woman. I
cisgender
love that
people.
one.
Yeah, Let Me Die a Woman is very exploitative. Or like Bob Clark's She-Man, A Story of Fixation.
Any,
Very
like,
exploitative film.
Ed Wood did
Glenn
one, right?
Glenda.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Ed Wood's at least coming from a place of earnestness. Ed Wood is not a cis person.
Right.
Which, but these were independent films. These were predominantly trashy exploitation films, even then. And more often than not, did not feature actual transgender individuals. They were either cisgender men in a dress for humor or for exploitation, or they were a cisgender woman in the case of something like I Know What I Want, kind of making a these are our times melodrama, very controversial. What would you do? Like abortion, hot topic issue films, or Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, or these kind of problem films of the 1960s and 70s, which I'm very over. But I Want What I Want is very good. It's very Now Voyager-esque. It's very sad. And it's also very focused on bottom surgery and on cutting that old penis off. Sick and tired of it. It really wasn't, we ended up getting, underground queer filmmakers like John Waters and Pedro Almodovar making films with trans actors in them. I mean, look at Pink Flamingos.
Right.
You've Afraid of John Waters, trans woman. She was going to be getting bottom surgery in a couple of days, so she wanted to come and flash on screen one last time.
She's
and
iconic.
It's fucking hilarious,
Yeah.
and she's a goddamn hero.
Yeah.
And then Almodovar has trans actors and characters, and everything from Law of Desire to All About My Mother, big Oscar-winning films even. But for the longest time, all we had were obvious man in ill-fitting dress to either look funny or to look shocking. And this is either going to be read as a murderer or as basically a clown.
Right.
Or some variation of both.
Right.
And so this is incredibly heinous and awful. And I mean, like, it's bad. Like, I don't need to beat the dead horse of this is bad. If you don't know why this is bad, you should fucking do some soul searching.
Yeah.
If you don't know why this is a bad trope, why this is incredibly harmful and violent, I don't know how to explain it to you. I don't know how to explain you should care about other people. Not to say that these are bad movies. Not to say that Psycho is a bad film. Not to say that you shouldn't watch Psycho. You should. You should watch Dressed to Kill. You should watch Sleepaway Camp. These are good movies. I mean, Silence of the Lambs is a good film, and Jonathan Demme is amazing, and it's a little turfy for me. Anyway, back to Deep Red, though. This is an incredibly prevalent trope and twist. So the choice of the macro close-up of the eyeliner being applied is a strong one, especially in those little sequences, because it's done every single time.
So what you're saying basically is that the audience would be primed to read this as like another cross-dressing killer situation.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is only compounded by the fact that one or two scenes later, we are introduced to David Hemming's friend, who's also a jazz musician named Carlo. Carlo is a gay man and is depicted as such. And we discover this in a very visual way.
Yeah.
Of David Hemming's going to see Carlo, and Carlo's door is answered by Carlo's partner at the time, who is in the film a man, but who is played by a woman.
Yes. Let's back up.
Let's talk about this.
Yeah. yeah.
Yeah.
So we're definitely going to talk about that scene because it's really important. So Helga's done for, right? She's in her apartment. Fucking gorgeous interiors in this movie. I just have a note here that says wall shell because there's just like a huge shell on the wall. I love Italian interior design, so that's part of what I love about Giallo films. The door rings. Helga goes to answer it, immediately feels terror. A figure bursts through the door and brutalizes her with a hatchet. And the gloved killer also steals all of Helga's notes. And now we see a man, Marcus, walking on the empty Roman streets at night. And this is musician Marcus Daly. And he encounters a drunk, an alcoholic, a fellow musician who compares playing a piano to playing a woman. We're not really buying it because the moments between them are pretty gay. The
Very
way that
gay.
they touch each
And
other.
they're shot in these beautiful tableaus of the Trevi Fountain and then this very empty looking diner bar that's like absolutely aping off of Nighthawks.
Yes.
And it is a very surreal set piece because it's empty and it's stark and it's huge and they look tiny and every figure in that bar is still and unmoving. And it feels like the afterlife. It feels like the ether. It feels like nothing should come in and out of this space. This feels like an absolutely sacred little moment in time.
Yes. So the two men hear this shrill scream. Carlo says, maybe somebody's getting raped. Which I thought was a really disturbing line. And because he's like very cavalier about it. And Marcus sees Helga at her window screaming for help. And suddenly the killer pushes her and half of her body crashes through the window. Very, very Dario Argento. He loves this. Marcus runs up to the apartment. And we don't know it yet, but this is Marcus's building. So this is his neighbor, so he knows who this is, sort of. And he finds the door open to her apartment. There's a trail of blood that he follows down the hallway, and he finds Helga's body impaled on broken glass. And he sees a figure walking way outside, parallel to Carlo, who does not notice, or seems to not notice. Police come and survey the crime. They're incompetent, like you said. And Marcus
comically so,
like ignoring.
They are the comedic relief in this film.
Yeah, like completely ignoring Marcus, like pointing out clues. Like Marcus says, wasn't there a painting here? I swear there was a painting here when I was in the apartment. And they're like, meh, whatever. And
yeah,
this lady photographer, Gianna Brazzi, shows up, who's like a Gal Friday.
And played by the absolutely iconic Daria Nicolodi in her first collaboration with Dario Argento. They would eventually go on to write Suspiria. And they would go on to produce such other great works as Asia Argento, their daughter.
My problematic queen.
Oh, hell yes.
Yeah. So Jana is a reporter. She was listening to one of Helga's lectures earlier in the afternoon. Actually, this is where the gender fucking comes in immediately, because I noticed one of the cops calls her Johnny, which is kind of like making fun of her for being, because that's the masculine version of the name Gianna. So it's making fun of her for being like manly, for, daring to have opinions. And
and she dresses in suit jackets.
Yes.
She's loud and she's brash and she's, very Rosalind his girl Friday. She's funny and she's like actually interested in this crime and she's interested in solving this and she believes David Hemming's character. Every little opportunity that he has to present himself as being very macho masculine man, she not only shuts it down, she beats him.
Yes. So back outside, Marcus is asking Carlo if he saw a man in a brown raincoat. And there's these amazing long shots that encompass like all of the Roman landscape, like you were saying, all these tableaus. Marcus tells Carlo that he noticed a painting disappeared from the apartment. So now we cut to, there's a lot of cuts in this film where we're kind of unsure of the timeline of things. But it cuts right away to Marcus and Gianna observing Helga's funeral from afar. And it's a Jewish funeral, which is notable to me as a Jew, because that's just not something you see in film a lot. And it kind of denotes her as like from Lithuania, like from that area of the world. And it's just interesting to me to see that in an Italian film, especially something that is taking place in Rome at this point. Rome has historically a lot of anti-Semitism. There's a whole Jewish section of the city still that Jewish people live in. It's very ghettoized still. So I just found that a fascinating little tidbit. Also, just because in horror film, it's usually like Catholic iconography. Like there's just not a lot of other religious iconography in horror.
No, it's always like when you don't repel a vampire with the Star of David, now do you?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's it makes me think of the little bit in Ash versus Evil Dead when he buries the two parents and makes two little crosses for them, and she just very calmly says, they were Jewish, right?
Yeah, yes, very that. And it's like I don't know what else to say about it except that it's just like it's very surprising to me.
Just Dario does a very, especially again in these early Giallo films, does a very good job of kind of opening up his world in a way that is a little unexpected. And again, with like the amount of prevalent queer characters in Birth, Crystal Plumage, here in Deep Red, Four Flies in Grey Velvet. I mean, Argento said it when it was asked about this. He said, well, gay people exist in the world. Why wouldn't they be in my movies?
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's kind of the same degree of like, again, he's a big cinephile. He's a big raised on films. His father worked in films. He's seen a lot of movies, especially to make the kinds of very virtuoso films that he makes. He knows the tropes. He knows what you're expected from media, and he knows what you don't see, and he knows what is in the world and that we're missing on screen. And so I feel like he's intentionally adding as much of that as possible, even in the smallest ways, to like get you off your game of like, this isn't that movie.
Yes. Yeah. No.
This is not a Christian funeral.
Yeah.
This is not a straight man. This is not, a feminine reporter. So at every opportunity, he's going to take these things away from your very, very atypical genre film, or just film in general. Because again, like, we know it's a wider world out there than it's depicted in media. Flat out.
Right.
Like, end all be all. We get a very specific view of the world through movies, which is not accurate to the one around us.
Symbolically, like, this film is very interested in some ways with the concept of like being foreign or not from a place. And, Helga is Lithuanian, Marcus is he's American, right? So it's there is this kind of there is some themes of being an outsider here as well. So at the funeral, Gianna is kind of explaining to Marcus who everybody is. She points out Professor Giordani, who's a psychology professor who's specifically interested in parapsychology. She says they were more than friends. He practically kept her. She also points out Bardi, who's a supposed clairvoyant and friend of Helga's. So and these two characters will become more important later. So Marcus drives away with Gianna in her car, more gender fucking here, because he's in like
Her
this,
tiny little car.
her tiny little car, and Marcus has to sit in the broken seat, which is like so much lower than hers.
Mm-hmm.
Marcus says he suffers from claustrophobia, and the car is triggering it. He speaks to Professor Giordani and Barty in the empty conference room where Helga was holding her talk and asking about her outburst from that day. And Gianna inquires about a man who left mid-presentation, which we're like, oh, that's the killer. And Gianna's conversation with Marcus about his nerves. There's a lot of gender fucking with these two characters. I'm wondering if there are some moments between them that you can think of that aren't in this US cut, because I know you were saying there's more with Gianna, because this is when they have the conversation where Marcus is being a sexist asshole and says that women are weaker, and Gianna challenges him to arm wrestling.
Yeah, they sit down. She's like, you know what? We're hunting down a killer, but fuck it. Swipes the shit off the table and just like go and he beats her. She beats him twice.
Yes, and he keeps insisting she's cheating
in a row.
Yeah.
Yup. And she absolutely takes it, like bends him over backwards and proves it. So far, I think the only thing, like major from the extended cut that we haven't addressed is the introduction of Marcus. He's introduced differently in the extended cut. So he's introduced before Helga, and the extended Argento cut, immediately following the very Christmassy holiday themed opening of the film. We see Marcus conducting a small group of jazz musicians in like this weirdly empty like church or grotto, very marble, kind of empty room. And he's just standing over a piano as he's got musicians around him, and he's trying to conduct them and trying to, get them to congeal together. And it's just kind of not going. It's just kind of, he's clearly a jazz musician because he meanders a bit, and they don't really gel as much as a little sextet or quartet or trio. I don't remember how musicians are there. Should. And then we cut from that to the theatrical introduction of Helga Ullman. So he's introduced first.
Okay.
In that cut. And he's introduced, it's the only time we ever see him being a musician rather than talking about music or just sitting at his piano. And he's actually like interacting with other musicians. He's playing music. And it seems like this is something important to him, but he's also not, and he seems respected in this field. He seems respected by these other musicians, and he seems, at least moderately successful. But at the same time, he's exhausted, and he's not the professional you'd expect of that scenario. He's not doing his job, in my opinion, at least. He's not. He doesn't seem successful he seems successful in the way that people listen to him and he has, notoriety, but he does not seem successful in actually getting them to play together. He seems in not actually like communicating with these people, which is very interesting to note. He doesn't play well with others, one would say.
Right. Which
we see later on in the film.
Happens in this scene, right? Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
Jonna kind of like mocks him, and Marcus refuses to take her to his next location, says there are some things you just can't do with liberated women. And Gianna says she'll do her own investigation and see who comes out on top, and which is a cute little double entendre. And he says, when will I see you? Or she says, when will I see you again? Which is usually like what the man says. And he says, never. And she goes, how about later tonight? Again, which is usually what the man in these positions does, right? Like not taking no for an answer.
She is she is on that dick. She really,
Yeah,
she's
really
got a
likes
thing for
some
him.
reason.
And I mean, hates David Hemmings. Like, I can see it.
I'm just
I'm
like,
down.
she's so, whatever. She's so much hotter. But
No, she is.
Yes.
Listen, if Helga Ullman was still alive, we'd be shipping something entirely different.
Exactly. So Marcus goes to see, but she's not. Marcus goes to see Carlo, and runs into his like kind of crazy, overbearing mother, who forces him to.
Did you know that she was an actress? Because she was an actress.
She's gonna tell you.
Did you know that she was an actress? She was an actress. Yes.
She's like a crazy.
She's going to let you know.
Former actress type, and she's like trying. She keeps calling Marcus an engineer. And it's pissing him off, and he's like, "I'm a pianist."
And then she hears that, and she says, "Oh my god, we should play together. We should play together."
Yeah, right.
She's very fun and very interesting, and she's played by Clara Colomé, who is a famous Italian actress. She was in like Ossessione, and a lot of like 1940s and 50s classic Italian neorealist cinema. So like. She's not just somebody's mom.
Right. She would be recognized.
She is an actress.
Yes.
Yeah.
It would be like a nod to that.
Yeah, she's kind of playing the baby Jane. So she's there in that kind of role.
Right. So he's kind
she's
of
much more
he's leading.
She's much more congenial than that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the mother gives Marcus some info on where Carlos is. He sits at the house of someone named Ricci. And then next we get the shot of the very effeminate person in a robe answering the door, and Marcus is confused.
Very Andrea Ricci.
Yes. Yeah. Marcus is confused by this person's gender. So let's talk about Ricci. So Ricci is supposed to be a gay man, but is played by a woman. Can you describe this character? Like, what do you make of this character in this scene?
Well, it's her presence there and the way the camera lingers on the door as she like very calmly and casually answers it, absolutely not giving a fuck.
Right. Yeah.
And like kind of in a state of undress because, I mean, they're in this robe that's kind of revealing, kind of, how can I put this in a way that's kind of polite and respectful? They've got a very just got fucked look.
Mm-hmm. Very respectful.
yeah. They've got a very like post fuck afterglow.
Yeah.
And so being told that Carlo is at this person's place, and this is the person who's answering the door, and this is the way they look and the way they're acting, there's very little question as to what Carlo is doing there.
Right.
But we hang on Ricci and we hang on this presentation a bit for the exact same reason that Alfred Hitchcock hangs on Norman Bates in that big reveal at the end of Psycho. Because the man knows what's going to like take people off their seats just a little bit, which is we're not expecting this to be, a queer presentation, A, and like the relationship that Carlo is having. But B, this is some gender fuckery to the nth degree. We are presenting a gay man as done by a woman in drag. Like a little bit of facial hair painted on.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's really, really interesting. And it's done in a way that like, again, this is investigation. This is exposition. There's little that you can do in sequences like this to like shock and like engage the audience in the same way that like being sliced up with an axe will. So Argento is finding ways of both deepening these characters, deepening the mystery and what we can kind of glean from our little glimpses into them, while also like doing his little best to shock the audience.
Mm-hmm.
And so we hang on Ricci for like a good little while to kind of drink them in. And again, they have that knowing smirk on their face, and you can kind of feel it behind the camera too, of Argento being like, yeah, no, you're not getting what you think you're getting.
Right.
And again, like, if you're just aiming for some androgyny and some gender fuckery just to kind of pull the wool over the eyes of your audience just a little bit, and just to be a little unnerving, just a little unsettling in a way that you just can't pinpoint something because it's just uncanny enough. Fucking respect that. That's how you play with gender and gender presentations in a fun way in movies.
Yeah.
I am absolutely down for that. And then Ricci is very like considerate and loving partner also.
Yes.
Because they're concerned over Carlo because Carlo's been on a bender for weeks.
Yeah, and he's drunk, he's sick in bed. He says to Marcus when he sees him, good old Carlo, he's not only a drunk but a faggot as well. And Ricci tries to talk to Marcus, who's obviously like uncomfortable but is trying. He's uncomfortable but he's like, okay, like he's probably a bit more sensitive as an artist type.
It's also like, you know, he saw a woman getting murdered last night. This isn't the weirdest thing to happen this week.
Exactly. There's a moment that kind of makes me misty-eyed a little bit where Carlos and Marcus are leaving the apartment and Carlo apologizes to Ricci and you can tell wants to kiss them goodbye, but doesn't out of embarrassment because Marcus is there.
Yeah.
So I know it's like a really heartbreaking moment.
These are tender, well-formed queer characters.
Right.
And we get like, you know, a couple minutes with them.
Yes.
Like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Like, again,
there's
1975.
There's
the fact
pathos.
that this wasn't cut out of the film. This is like, they're actually caring about these characters, caring about, you know, depicting them as like, but it's like Argento is doing it as, you know, caring for these characters, and that pathos is there, and you feel empathy, and you feel like it tugs at your heartstrings.
Right.
You're reading it the right way.
Right. So,
but he knows a 1970s Italian or American audience is going to read this as, deviance.
Right. That could be the killer.
Yeah, maybe it's this Ricci person that we don't know much about, but they look weird and funny, and they're a homo.
Right.
Or, what about Carlo? Carlo's distraught, depressed, a homo.
And a homo. Yeah.
Homos are known for theatrical tendencies. Homos are known for being crazy, different, outsiders, murderers maybe. I've seen movies. And putting on makeup, putting on eyeliner, that's a pretty faggy thing to do.
Right.
Dressing up in drag to kill someone, you'd have to be a homo to do that.
Yeah, so it's very, you're right, like he's very intentionally leading us to these conclusions.
When I rewatched the film to come here to talk about this, I watched it with my partner who had never seen it before. They'd only seen Suspiria, and they really hadn't stepped into the giallo genre very much, but they're big fans of murder mysteries, they're big fans of Hitchcock and stuff like that. And they're non-binary, and they're an animator, and they're fantastic. And I love them so much. And we were watching it, and this scene came up, you know, not long after the little tableau of the kids' toys and the blade and the makeup. And, you know, Marcus leaves the apartment and stuff like that, and after we've been introduced to these characters, and they just immediately turned to me and said, "Oh, god damn it, is that really the killer? Is it really gonna be like Carlo in a dress? Like, are you fucking kidding me?" And I was like,
yeah,
it still works. It's a math equation. He knows that we have the keys in our head to read media in a certain way.
Right.
And he knows how to rearrange the numbers to get a different solution.
Yeah, he knows. He gets us. So Marcus says goodbye very respectfully, like looking into Ricci's face like a human being. And Ricci blows a sweet, friendly kiss. It's just like a sweet moment. Or at least, you know, me as a big old queer reads it as a sweet moment. And
as do I.
Yeah.
And it's the last of the film.
So Marcus and Carlo are walking away, and Marcus is only interested in talking about the painting that was missing from Helga's. He's not even really interested in Carlo's recent sexual divulsion. And
Mm-hmm.
Carlo actually touches Marcus freely, like literally like physically touching him, telling him that he should pack up and forget the crime, which I found interesting. Marcus is pretty unaffected by Carlo being revealed to be a homosexual.
Mm-hmm.
And the two men pass by like what seems to be the super's office. The super is also a queer-coded person in a robe. Queer people love robes in this movie. And
Oh, yes. In this movie?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
yeah,
In
I
life.
know, right? I have like 5 robes. And he's smoking. This person is smoking and like watching a news report on Helga's murder, which is crucial because the reporter says the witness Marcus could possibly identify the murderer.
Mm-hmm.
So Marcus is sitting at his piano, writing music in his apartment, and there's another POV shot, which is how we know the killer is approaching. And Marcus hears the killer's theme song, and
he starts playing it on the piano.
He starts playing it on the piano, and he senses this killer, and he holds up this statue as a weapon while still playing with one hand, so as not to alert the killer
make
that
them
he knows.
Yeah.
And there's this close-up shot of his sweat also. So many good macro shots.
It's a
This film.
great little suspense sequence of building up of the killer's getting closer, he's getting prepared. The killer's getting a little bit closer. He's still playing. He's tricking the killer now to thinking that he isn't aware. He's picked up his weapon. He's getting into his position kind of near the door. He's getting ready. And just when the line is about to snap and there's about to be an attack, the phone rings.
Yes.
Very loud and very abrasive.
Yeah, and Marcus locks his door and answers the phone, and he says, I don't know who you are, but you gotta help me. And it's Gianna. And a voice behind the door says ominously, you're safe now. I'll kill you sooner or later. It's like,
That's a good killer voice. I gotta say, that's spot on.
yeah, because it's like this genderless rasp. Like, you can't...
Yeah, it's again. It sounds like it could be a kid. It sounds like it could be a man or a woman. It's just like it's just the generic creepy voice, like
Proto-
grade A, right down the middle. Like
proto-scream, but like gender fucked.
Mhm.
So Marcus watches the killer leaving outside. He buys a vinyl of the child song that he heard, and he plays it for Professor Giordani, and he says, didn't Helga say she heard a child singing in the auditorium? And the professor talks about how he thinks the murderer is a schizophrenic paranoid. So we get some ableism here as well. So there, which is, you know,
wouldn't be the 70s without it.
yeah, it would not be the 70s without some ableism in your horror.
Also, can I just say,
Yeah.
there's nothing that I love more than saying, the killer's crazy. They must be paranoid.
Yeah.
As if the main character in the film isn't fucking paranoid.
Right.
But okay.
So, but again, like Dario Argento is like playing with these tropes, right? Like he knows that the audience thinks that the killer is insane, right? So Barty also mentions that Helga saw a house in her vision and relates it back to this kind of obscure folk tale that he read about and recommends a book. This is when Marcus reads the book in the library, and he stops at a story called The House of the Screaming Child.
Can I just take a moment to
yes.
say that there's a lot of points in this plot that like when you're watching the movie rolls on in a way that just feels natural and right, and you accept everything that happens. But like any giallo film, the more you step back and the more you kind of like look through the plot and events of these films with a fine-tooth comb and logic, you're kind of like, what in the ever-loving fuck?
Yeah, like this obscure
Like,
folk tale.
first of all, the fact that
what?
like the very next day he went to a record store and found the exact record
right
of what that song was did he go into that record store, find a piano, play that little thing, and the guy just knew it so perfectly like, first of all, that. And then off of only saying, so there's this song, this is what it sounds like. And Helga mentioned a child murder and a song. Hey, I remember reading
It's so
I remember reading a
random.
book from years ago that mentioned a story about a house, kind of like a big old house kind of in the countryside, that people would hear this creepy little song from. And so all of a sudden, we've been looking for an axe murderer this whole time, who a psychic woman said has killed before and then more than likely killed them. And then this one guy is like, yeah, I read a ghost book before.
And
Yeah, I
then
read this ghost book this one time.
Immediately finds the book and the story.
Immediately finds the book. Yeah, goes to a supernatural library. This isn't like a supernatural section of a library. This library is devoted to supernatural stuff.
Take me there.
Kick fucking ass.
Yeah.
He finds the book immediately. And then it's like the second thing he opens to.
Right. It's like right
And
there.
It's right there. There's a photo of the house, and it's not like a legend or a ghost story. It's like, yeah, we interviewed people in this town.
Yeah.
They said that there was this creepy house and that you could hear this child singing from there. So we all thought it was creepy enough to put in this book.
And so, yeah, so Marcus steals that photo from the book of the house, and he calls Gianna and tells her about the book and asks if she can track down the author, Amanda Rigetti. And we get more shots of the killer's objects and eyes, so we're like, oh boy, they're about to go kill Amanda. So now we meet Amanda, a lovely woman in a pink cardigan who lives in a house in like a rural area outside the city, and
The middle of fucking nowhere.
the middle of nowhere.
There is her house. It is on a street. A bus picks an old woman up from the street, leaving her house. She looks in every direction around her, and there is jack all. It feels very much like the crop duster scene from North by Northwest, of just like, you are alone. The amount of like vast wide spaces in this movie to really hammer home how deeply alone you are. Again, it's very interesting that Hemming's character would make a point early on of saying how claustrophobic he is and how afraid of very tight and confined spaces he is. Meanwhile, you get no confined spaces in this movie. None.
No.
This movie is stark and empty and vast, and this is not the last time that we'll see stuff like this. And it is those moments that are the scariest. So, once again, Marcus is wrong. It is much worse to be in a big, wide, empty space.
And Amanda's, that old lady leaves her house, and she goes back into her house, and she sees this baby doll swinging from a noose from the ceiling.
Good omens, surely.
Yeah, and she runs out of her house to catch that woman, her housekeeper,
Bus
I
is
think.
gone, and there's
She's
nothing.
long gone. Yeah, and we always think of the European countryside as being so idyllic, and in this moment, it's so terrifying.
Well, it's also the kind of thing of, you're watching this, and she's gone inside. She's seen the baby doll. She's run right back outside, which if you know the horror cliches of Scream, you did the right one there.
Yeah.
But there's nowhere to go.
Right.
There's nowhere to go. She's got nowhere to run. There's obviously a killer here. She knows what's up. She knows what's going to happen. She's not dumb. She's not, the sorority girl going to get laid and, oh no, knife in my back. She knows what's coming.
Yes.
And she goes back into the house. Because she knows the only thing she can do is try to deal with it, try to stop it, try to defend herself.
Right, try to fight for her life.
It's honestly, this is a part of the film that's almost never discussed, but it's like genuinely one of the most upsetting parts of the movie for me, because it's just, she knows what's going down. She knows what she's getting in for, and she has basically no other option.
Yeah, except to, be this kind of final girl type figure. She
Doesn't always work like that, no, does it?
and she goes back into her house because, like you said, where else is she gonna go? And the house is dark, and she turns on the light, and she sees another baby doll swinging from a rope. And there's this also amazing shot of the eye of the killer in the closet, which is like,
Oh, it's terrifying.
Yeah,
She does a walk through the house trying to find if this person is there, trying to find, some defensive weapon. And she, walks down the hallway, and the camera kind of lingers on a big dark closet. And then in between a couple pieces of clothing hung up, there's a big black space in between. And then an eye opens in the middle of all that black. And it is so beautiful.
it is.
But it also ties back to the first kill of the movie, of something just hidden in the frame somewhere, of the killer just somehow knowing their environment like a predator, and knowing how perfectly to hide within it. It's incredibly upsetting.
Yes, this is the scariest murder to me. I mean, the music.
It's the most realistic one to me too.
Amanda kind of knows it has to do with the house, because of course she does. Because she says the house, the ghost of that house, and the music like stops abruptly. The goblin music stops, and Amanda clutches a sewing needle as her weapon, and suddenly a bird flies in, and out of shock, Amanda like stabs the bird with the needle.
It's her own bird. She keeps two
Oh,
birds.
so it's her bird. Okay. Yeah, I didn't get that.
She has bird cages in her house, and she's got two, I think they're ravens.
Oh,
and
so God.
And the killer lets them, like, opens up the door to the cage, and the first thing they do is attack her, not the killer. They attack Amanda, and she just immediately kills that bird.
Yes.
One of the two. And
right, the other one is flying around, and
yeah,
this figure in a hat and raincoat knocks Amanda over, and she crawls to the bathroom, trying to escape through the window, but the killer attacks her again, and we see through the killer's POV, and she's knocked to the floor and unconscious, and the killer runs a scalding bath and hybrid drowns and burns Amanda in it. What a way to go.
It's incredibly upsetting.
Yes.
For a couple of reasons. First of all, this is a long, drawn out murder. The other two that we've seen, or at least in partial, I mean, they're stabbings, which, no thank you. But at the same time, like, they're over fairly quickly.
Right.
There's the terror of the realization that there's someone
than this.
Yeah. Someone coming to get you, and then you're stabbed a couple times, and then knocked out of a window, partially. This woman is beaten and then routinely tossed. Like, the killer takes the time to draw a fucking bath in between beating them.
Yes.
Which is somehow basically boiling. I don't know what water and power costs in Italy, but this must be outrageous. And the effect of, like, she keeps pulling her out, like, she's near drowning her. Every time that she thinks she's going to die, she pulls her right back out so she can get enough air. And every time they pull her out, she's got a new makeup prosthetic on of more burnt and scalded skin. It starts out a little red, and then it's open wounds, and it is not pretty.
No.
And then she finally, just tosses her aside and walks out.
Yep.
She's basically, she's still clinging on to life, but she's basically there. And then, and again, gorgeous design, gorgeous building, gorgeous room, and this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful bathroom on this mirror tiled wall going up the entire way. fogged up from the heat of the scalding bathtub, she begins to write something on the steamed up wall before the killer comes back and does her in.
Yes. And so she dies mid writing,
Mid-clue.
mid gesture, mid clue, yeah. So that night.
And then
Oh, go ahead.
And then the killer sees what she's doing, turns the taps off, opens everything up, and it all goes away.
Right.
It all evaporates, and it's all gone.
So
God fucking damn it.
I know, it's brutal. Marcus finds Amanda's body because he comes to her house that night. And Marcus shows a photo of the house from Amanda's book to he finds her body and he sees that gesture she made. So Marcus shows a photo of the house from Amanda's book to a gardener who identifies the plant in the photo as a Dracaena indivisa, a plant that is not native to Europe. And
well, it's a great sequence throughout that of him being like, well, my one lead is fucking dead, and then he goes to a gardener, he goes to a couple gardeners, he goes to an architect, he goes to everyone that might be able to pinpoint this, and it's like genuine sleuthing. It's like, and it's the most condensed time in the movie. Like, this was probably a couple days that he did this, and it's condensed down to 5-minute little funky little sequence. But
I was confused by the timing because then he tells the professor about Amanda, and I was like, so he just left the body there, Amanda's body there.
Well, in maybe this is something from the extended cut, because after he finds the body, he calls up Daria Nicolodi and says, well, she's dead. Well, we're one lead short. And he's like, well, what the fuck am I gonna do? And Daria Nicolodi's like, well, I'll call the police. You need to leave because I'm sure your prints are everywhere and they're gonna think it's you.
Yes, I believe that was not in the version that I watched.
Yeah.
So
he skedaddles out of there, and he meets up with Daria Nicolodi, and she's like, let's be done with this. You know what? This was fun. This was like a game, but getting murdered is not worth like a fucking article. Like, she's like, let's go to Spain. Let's leave town. Let's just be done with this. I don't want to die. Clearly this person's not done. They're clearly onto us.
Right.
Because how the hell else would they know about this book? So you know what? Let's just be done with it. And he's like, okay, I'll think about it. And then that's when he goes on his little quest of investigating.
Okay. Yeah. So Marcus drives by a house that looks like the one from the photo of the infamous house, and he sees that particular plant in front. And the caretaker, the groundskeeper of the house, says that this guy named Schwartz used to own the place. Apparently it was full of ghosts, and Schwartz died by falling out of a window, the way that Helga died. And the professor goes to Amanda's, and Professor Giordani goes to Amanda's and talks to her housekeeper, that old woman from before, and looks at the house. And long story short, this is it's a cool build-up sequence with him finding the clue, but long story short, the professor sees that Amanda tried to write a message in the perspiration. And the housekeeper tells the professor that the police found a doll and that she heard them talking about a child. Marcus gets the keys to this mysterious house from the groundskeeper to go look at it. This is an interesting moment. I like this girl character we meet. The dude.
Oh, the creepy little girl.
Yeah, the creepy little girl.
The creepy little ginger girl in Italy.
Yeah, the groundskeeper sends his daughter with Marcus. But before that, he slaps her for like an unknown wrongdoing. We as the audience don't know. And the girl says, "Oh, don't pay attention. My father's crazy." And yet the camera pans down and we see at his feet a struggling, dying lizard with a needle stuck through it. That is the work of this little girl. So that's what he slapped her about. Again.
Yeah, no, this little girl's a fucking monster.
Yes. In Dario
And she's a little
Argento
fucking
is,
creep.
yeah, he's leading us, like, is this the killer? Because we have that creepy child's music. Like, is the killer a child? So the girl takes Marcus to this creepy house, and he goes to explore by himself and says he'll give her the keys back later. And she warns him that there are ghosts. Marcus explores the house, and he finds a wing of the house with sheetrock chipping. And under the sheetrock, he discovers a disturbing mural, which is a child holding a bloody knife over a dead body beside a Christmas tree. So we think of this scene from the beginning of the movie. The caretaker shows up with his daughter now that it is nighttime, and he's like, dude, you gotta leave. You've been here all day. And back at the professor's, Professor Giordani, he's the next victim, and he's skulking around the house, hearing weird noises. And finally, the killer whispers his name. And this is a terrifying moment where it's
probably the most iconic set piece in the movie, just because it's like, also, you don't fucking expect anything like this to even possibly happen in the movie.
Wild.
It's very what the fuck, get out of
Yeah.
there. And it's a very niche thing that, like, after I saw it for the first time, I kind of had to look up being like, is that a thing? But you kind of like the goblin music that's been kind of building up throughout the sequence drops out, and then you're gonna hear like a boom, 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 and then the door swings open, and in walks this creepy little fucking robot doll thing, and it is just absolutely awful, and I hate it. And Giordani, like, he picks up like a letter opener or something, or like a knife, and like just chops it down.
Yes.
Immediately, and it like the head cracks open and it keeps moving, and the little gears in the face keep, oh my god, it is like,
It's really
I have
scary.
a friend who was deeply like afraid of like Child's Play and Chucky as a kid, and like since has like a doll thing, and someone recommended Deep Red to him, and he sat down and watched it and was enjoying it, and then this scene happened and he turned it off and took the disc out and never finished it.
Oh my god. Yeah, I mean, if you're afraid of dolls, this is the one.
It like comes out of
'cause you're
nowhere,
not
and
expecting
it's like
it
it's
at
over
all.
before, yeah.
Yeah, and it's over
Shit.
before it's over immediately. And the gloved killer emerges from behind a curtain and does this horrible thing where they slam the professor's mouth into things. And
Into like the edges of tables.
into the
and,
edges
like,
of
edge
tables.
yeah. Oh,
It's awful.
gross.
Yeah.
It hurts so bad.
And then finally slaughters him with a knife. Marcus calls Carlo, who isn't home. Crazy mom answers, keeps trying to have conversation with him. Suddenly, Marcus notices something new about the photograph of the haunted house, which we don't notice. He leaves, leaving Gianna a note about where he is. And at the house, what Marcus has noticed is that a window on the house that was in the photo is no longer there. It's been built over. So Marcus fucking scales the side of the house and begins trying to reveal the hidden window beneath sheetrock with a pickaxe. And he loses his footing and he almost falls to his death. But regains...
Again, great male hero. Great, absolutely infallible. He a genius of a man. Also, and again, the idea of like, you didn't notice a whole ass, like, not even a window, like a turret on this house was missing.
Right.
Which kind of goes back to, what about that painting that he thinks is missing from the apartment too? How perceptive is this man? why do things keep disappearing from this world?
Right.
Yeah.
So he exposes this walled off area, and he goes back into the house and he finds this area and he exposes the wing more with the pickaxe, and in this empty area in the middle of the dusty floor sits a desiccated corpse. And
It's an entire room that's been walled off.
yeah.
And it's just there's a whole ass corpse that's like in mid shriek too. It is not a fun look. And also, fun fact, one of the reasons why I didn't see this movie for so long, that image of just this decaying
It was like on the
body
VHS
sitting there,
cover.
it was the DVD covers for years. And I was just like, what in the hell? I don't want to watch this. No. And also, like, good on you, whatever Anchor Bay or whoever that was, who, like, that's not selling this movie at all. Are
No,
you kidding
it
me?
was such a strange choice.
The fucking no.
And
But like the only other thing in this giant whole walled off, like almost wing, is like Christmas tree,
mhm. And
couple pieces of furniture.
and someone knocks Marcus unconscious as he's backing away in horror from that corpse. And Marcus awakens outside the house, which is burning to the ground, and Gianna appears explaining, and now we're kind of like, is Gianna the killer? And she's explaining that she got his message about investigating the house and arrived in time to save him. And she says, a minute or two longer and you would have been a roast duck, baby.
And can I also just
Yeah.
point out how absolutely hellfire stupendous the cinematography in this sequence is?
Mhm.
It's really unsettling because you've just had this big shock of dead body, main character's knocked unconscious, and then the first thing that he and the audience wake up to is the fucking giant house on fire, looking like the end of Rebecca. And then you get this insane profile shot of Daria Nicolodi really tight on her face, and she's being lit by the flames of this house, and her face is just like washed in like this flickering orange, and it's unnerving and it won't stop, and it just like makes her look like something out of the mouth of hell. It makes her look like a demon.
Mhm.
And it is one of the coolest images in the movie. But yeah, it is absolutely like, ooh, don't fucking trust her.
Right. Yeah, we trust at this
Great.
point we trust no one. And as Marcus and Gianna are waiting at the caretaker's house for the police, Marcus notices that the caretaker's daughter has drawn a picture identical to the hidden mural he found in the house. And she tells him that she saw the picture in the archives at the local school. So the father says, you heard her. She invented it herself. She does that. She likes horrible things.
She's a little fucking piece of shit.
Yeah.
She's a little fucking monster.
Yeah, he's like, you should
look
see
at
what
her.
she does to lizards.
Yeah, like the other stuff that she has on that wall is also kind of fucking not good either. Like, she's a little fucking creep.
Yeah.
But she just so happens to have also copied this from the school. Also, the school archives. She just so happened to one day got in trouble and had to clean up the school archives.
I know.
Found
it's also
this
perfect.
one piece of art.
And why was
and
the school keeping
liked
that?
it so much that she copied it like almost Xerox quality, like it looks the same, and then pinned it up over her bed.
Crazy.
This little girl scares me.
Yeah, she's terrifying. She's very
She's
bad
a
seed.
monster.
Yeah, and the Marcus and Gianna break into the local school, and in the bathroom the water is running and there's graffiti that says kill your mother and father.
Yeah, I love
our
Argento so much.
Yeah. And Marcus and Gianna explore the student records. Gianna leaves the room to use the phone to call the police and tell them that they're there. And she hears a voice call her name, the killer's hallmark. And Marcus searches through the records, finding the drawing. And Marcus calls for Gianna and goes searching for her. And in one
When
room,
he's discovered the name on the back of the drawing.
yes. And in one room, he sees a drawing
Mhm.
of a hanged child on a blackboard moving back and forth. And suddenly,
Which was not there when they came in.
right. And suddenly he sees Gianna, who's been stabbed in the stomach but is still alive. And she says, all for a lousy story. And Marcus tells her that he knows who it is because he found the drawing. And suddenly Marcus is face to face with the attacker, Carlo, pointing a gun. And as a
Bum,
student,
bum, bum.
yes. And then we're like, okay, this is who the killer is. And as a student,
All right. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was the homo.
it was the homo.
Gay guy's gonna put on eyeliner and kill people.
Yeah.
Checks out with me, Doc.
And as a student, he drew the disturbing pictures. And Marcus says, so now what are you going to do? And Carlo says, kill you. I'm sorry because I like you. And
Mhm.
Carlo tells Marcus that he would have been fine if he just not stuck his nose in. And the cops burst in and they shoot Carlo, who escapes into the street, getting hit by a truck that drags
And
him.
caught on the truck.
Caught on the
Drags
truck. And drags him down the street. It's so drawn out.
It's very reminiscent of the killer confrontation and eventual death in Four Flies on Grey Velvet, which is also the killer runs into the street and is hit head on by an accidentally oncoming truck, and it's kind of done like slow-mo when the face hits it's awful. And that also has a very genderfuck ending and killer reveal that's rooted in gender dysphoria and is not dissimilar. Anyway, this is what becomes of Carlo.
Yes.
Carlo is dragged to a slow and painful death. And the cops are like, cool.
Yes. Like, the truck drags him. The truck stops. Carlo is like barely alive in the middle of the street, and then another car comes rushing down the street and runs over his head, killing him.
Yep. Like a watermelon.
And yeah, and the cops are just like, okay, cool, that's that, I guess.
Case closed.
Case closed. Marcus goes to the hospital where Gianna is, and he's told that she is still alive. But Marcus does not believe that Carlo killed Helga.
He walks back through the main little square from the beginning of the film with the Trevi Fountain right there, out in front of his apartment. And he kind of thinks back over that first night when everything went down. And he remembers looking up, hearing Olga scream with Carlo standing right next to him. And he also remembers looking down and seeing the killer walk away right past Carlo.
Yes.
So,
Can't be him.
to quote an equally masterful film, wrong kid died.
Yeah. Cannot be him. So
Nope.
he goes back to Helga's apartment, which is open for some reason. And
It's not open. It's got police tape all over it, and he just kicks it down. He just walks through it.
okay, so there's like a lot of little things that get cut because it's like suddenly he's just I think in what I saw, he's just like in the apartment. And
No, he's got to take the police tape down and go through in the
that's so
longer
funny.
cut of
I'm
it.
like, did they not want us to see that?
There's a lot more procedure to the
Yeah.
extended cut, which I really love. As someone who like loves these kinds of movies and watches them like candy,
Yeah.
I love an investigation sequence. So there's a lot more of that. in
Yeah,
this.
I think they thought Americans would just be too stupid. They were like, they don't need all this. So,
They're like, you got boobs and blood. All right, that's what we're selling. Yeah.
So he's investigating the apartment, and there he has an epiphany. And the night of the murder, it was not a missing painting, but it was a missing reflection. Specifically, Marcus saw the killer's reflection when he first entered the apartment. And as
There's
Marcus,
all of these paintings down the hallway
and then
of
there's
her
a
apartment and
mirror.
down separating hallways coming down, breaking off of that. And they're all of these like Boschian like hellscapes in these tormented phases. They're fucking terrifying. Helga's got taste. But one of them just so happened to be situated directly across from a mirror. So when he was walking down the hallway, he didn't see a painting there. He saw a mirror reflection of a painting of two faces in a hellscape, but he saw a third face situated in between them. And he walks back, sees the mirror, sees the painting, and realizes what he missed. And just as he realizes it,
As
boom,
Marcus
smack dab into the
realizes-
real killer.
Yes, the real killer is Martha, Carlo's mother.
Carlo's mom.
Yes.
The baby Jane. Yeah.
Yes.
In her brown leather trench coat, in her makeup, in the hat. She's got the look. Yep.
And she appears behind him with a meat cleaver. And she explains that she murdered her husband in front of the young Carlo as a child's song played. And we see this scene playing out. And then she walled off the room containing his body.
Also, she killed her husband because he was trying to put her in an asylum.
Yes. So,
She had been to an asylum while she was like a movie star, and because they made her, and she was out, and he wanted to send her back, and she wasn't having it. She wanted to stay an actress, and it's very Veronica Voss, and then he gets it.
Yep. And then she walled off his corpse in that room. And Carlo, scarred psychologically, did not kill anyone. He attacked Marcus and Gianna to protect his murderous mother from their investigation. So
His best friend is his mother.
Anyway. His friend is his mother, yes. Especially a gay boy. And flashback sequence to Martha's husband coercing her into going to an institution, like you said. And we also see her murder him in front of the Christmas tree in front of a very faggy Carlo. And a very faggy
And then she picks up the knife. Yeah. He picks up the knife and just watches the blood drip down. It's a hell of an image.
Martha attacks Marcus with a meat cleaver, and as they struggle, her necklace tangles in the bars of the building's elevator. Marcus sends the elevator down, slowly decapitating Martha in a truly wild depiction of the act. And Marcus stares into the deep red pool of her blood as the credits
roll. And the goblin score from the haunted house sequence comes back over on top of it.
Yes.
And we just stare into Marcus's eyes in the puddle of blood.
And that is Profundo Rosso.
That's deep red.
That's it.
That is.
So many fake outs of who the killer is going to be, and it's Martha. So, wow. Thank you so much for going through that with me.
I fucking love this movie.
Yes,
so
it's
much.
Amazing.
Again, it does he pulls in every major trope of the genre and of the horror subgenre like that were like big at the time. He pulls in the Omen, the Exorcist stuff with the creepy kid. He pulls in ghosts. He pulls in telepaths. He pulls in the gender fuckery of Psycho and William Castle. And then he pulls in, the fucking gender politics that was not being brought into the genre space at all. He pulls in queer people. He pulls in all of this stuff. Yeah. And somehow it works.
Yes.
It works beautifully. And again, like the middle of this movie is a ghost film.
Yes.
It just kind of takes a break to be like, no, it's ghosts now.
Right.
And then it's like, no, it's not. But also, like, yes and no. They kind of believe that this house is haunted because I guess Martha's just been going there and playing her creepy song,
Probably, yeah.
playing her creepy theme song. So it is an upsetting and incredibly fun ride. And it says a lot to me that this film is seen as the epitome of the genre, considering how much it plays with gender and sexuality. I mean, Argento loves a female killer, first of all.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you look at, again, not to be spoilery because I know they're not as popular films, but if you look at his earlier and even later giallo efforts, the killers are women more often than not. The killers are psychologically scarred individuals who enjoy the power of killing.
Yes.
And who, in Deep Red, the motivation for a lot of these kills is to cover up the knowledge that this person, is a killer, but it's not stopping anytime soon. And she mostly comes after Marcus at the end in retribution for Carlo's death, because she blames him for Carlo coming after him. But apart from that, like, she's not very distraught about these people she's killing. And same with the killers in Four Flies and Grey Velvet and Pearl of the Crystal Plumage. Cat of Nine Tails is a little bit more like espionage laden, which is a little dumb, but that one also similarly has the, we somehow figured out that one of these people has the tendency to be a killer. Now they better kill to clean it up, because good way of proving that you're not the killer is to kill people. Because one thing that's interesting, if you think about it, is like Helga never would have been able to pinpoint who this person was.
At all. All she
Never.
sensed was thoughts. She didn't even know what was happening.
She didn't even, she says you have killed and you will kill again.
Yes.
Because they have the mindset and the desire, clearly. But she never pinpointed them. And as proven later in the movie, it's not like they had a guest registry of everyone who was there. It's not like the police were going to be... It's not like the joke of a police force in this movie was going to be knocking down people's doors to be like, hey, so a psychic says some people who were there might be killers. Were you there? Were you a killer? That doesn't even happen after someone dies.
Yes.
So nothing would have come of that.
Right. Outside
of this killer's own paranoia for, their for her self-preservation, and a little bit, again, like they kind of enjoy it, and they, this is a Baby Jane character. She's an old spinster woman who's out of the limelight and doesn't know how to operate without people doting on her and loving her. So, I mean, it kind of makes sense that this is her comeback, if you will.
Right. Yes.
This is her attempt at connecting with people again.
Yes.
Yeah, staying relevant. And also, like, it also makes sense why she's so close with her son. Like, he loves her unconditionally, but also explains why Carlo has such depressive moods and is, unfortunately, an alcoholic. He's scarred by what he saw as a child, and he also clearly knows his mom's a killer.
Yes.
And he's doing nothing about it other than trying to protect her. Out of love and devotion.
It's Psycho.
I love Carlo. Carlo is a great character.
He is. I mean, it's Psycho if Norman Bates' mother was actually alive. It's, you know,
Yeah.
it has those, like you said, it's trying to lead us down all of those paths where we think we know.
And successfully, it still does it
Yes.
to this day. And again, while I was rewatching it, I had forgotten that Carlo was there during Helga's murder at the beginning. You forget that
You
by,
do, yes. Yeah.
like 10 minutes later, you forget that he was there.
Yeah.
And because like he doesn't act like he was there,
Yes.
first of all.
And then when
because
you
he's
think
so
he's the
half in the
killer, you're like,
bag.
oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. Completely forgetting he cannot be.
Yeah, that belief in that trope and that genre, and also just not to knock it, but that the giallo genre is never consistent. It's like
True.
no movie has ever cared about whether the killer was actually in that scene or not.
Yeah, so we're like, okay, great.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So
Watching a giallo film for the first time and trying to guess at who the killer is successfully is a fool's errand.
yes, because they really don't.
You're
want
never
you
gonna
to.
get it.
Yeah.
They don't want you to. It's like I think about Buñuel and Dali's Un Chien Andalou, which was created intentionally so that people couldn't analyze it, so that it was just bullshit craziness back to back to back to back to back for 20 minutes, so that you couldn't, find meaning from it. It's the same thing with these. They know people are gonna find the killer in an Agatha Christie story like this far in, based on this thing that they do, and so they're like, all right, we're gonna do everything that you can so you cannot guess the ending to this movie. And guess fucking what? I've seen a lot of these movies multiple times and I forget the endings because they're so. I forget the solutions to a lot of these.
I was like, I forget who the killer even is in this movie. So, thank you so much for all of your wonderful knowledge. Where can people find you on social media and see your artwork?
I am on Instagram talking about a lot of films like this and other nascent bullshit. And on Instagram at Hyde Sister, HYDE Sister, like the Hammer film, Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde. And then you can also find my art and get in touch with me for stuff relevant to that over at my website, which is sisterhydedesign.com.
And
so
you're also on Twitter at Sister Hyde, right?
Yeah, I said that up front. Well, it's Hyde Sister on social media because someone beat me to it, I guess.
God damn.
So it's just the inverse of that, and you can find my pretty little nun image across all of those.
Cool. And you can find me as always at Girls Guts Giallo on Twitter and Instagram, and patreon.com/Girls Guts Giallo to join my Patreon. Drusilla, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
And you have a great day.